ask us, in the name of our people, to find the global moral strategic leadership. Global because our problems are global. Moral because we must do the right thing. And strategic because we cannot solve every problem of the world, but we must solve those within our purview immediately. Thank you.
Which is my camera, this one?
Yes, well you're gonna, you talk to me, but then we have something like 7 cameras that'll capture it. Yeah. Okay, so whenever you're all ready, let us know. SDG Roundtable. Our guest today is a champion for people and for the planet. Her voice and leadership are inspiring action across the globe. We are thrilled to be joined by co-chair of the SDG Advocates, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. A very warm welcome to you and a congratulations. Today we saw that you're 100 influential. It's a pleasure really to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me and thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of so many whose voice I hope I can represent and who don't have the opportunity to be heard.
This year you've taken on the role of co-chair of the SDG Advocates along with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. As a Prime Minister of a small island state, why are the SDGs so important to you, to Barbados, and the world?
Well, the truth is the SDGs are just our normal development trajectory. That's what we come to work every day to do, to give opportunity to our people, to shield those who can't protect themselves, to give them access to education, to health, to water, to sanitation, to partnership, to investment, to stability. That's what we've been elected to do. That's what our societies want to do. And regrettably, we've had to put it in this kind of format because development is too uneven across the world. And in putting it in this format, it allows us to measure what we have achieved and to be able to work out where we need to go in order to bring development to those people who haven't gotten on the train yet.
And getting on the train is so important, and staying on the track,
That's right.
On track is even more important, getting to scale, reaching everyone, everywhere. On screen, we have one of your quotes.
If we can find the will to send people to the moon and solve male baldness, as I've said over and over, we can solve simple problems like letting our people eat at affordable prices.
One of your main issues has been financing for development.
Yeah.
You've been very vocal in highlighting how many countries are really struggling to finance the SDGs, given the high cost, especially right now, from compounding crisis we're facing, from pandemics to the war in Ukraine. What does the world need to do next on financing?
Well, when you add to the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, the climate crisis, which we've been suffering on for some time, and you add also the other, I call them the C's, the consequences of colonialism, crime, COVID pandemic, the climate crisis, and chronic NCDs, which made the pandemic worse for so many. All of these things conspire to literally crowd out any money that we have to put into development. And we've been saying, look, let's pause. One, we didn't cause the climate crisis. The G20 countries are responsible for 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions. But let's not only look at the flow of emissions, let's look at the stock. The Industrial Revolution is responsible for where we are today. And we have no problem with the progress that it brought per se, but when that progress comes at the expense of the rest of us in the world, the majority of us in the world, then we have a problem. And when it comes to the point where we can't even finance development for our own people, we have a bigger problem. And the injustice of being able to get the financing mechanisms correct is where we're fighting the battle, because we want to be able to bring development to our people, but we've got to be able to fund it. If we're spending our time funding the consequences of climate or the consequences of COVID, we're at war with COVID, we're at war with the climate, we're at war with war, and we now want to be at war with food. There are global public goods that need to be financed. And if we don't finance them, you're going to affect the poor, the not so poor, and the rich. And in the same way that we want, and we've come to understand with the pandemic, that what starts here has the capacity to end there. So we may be on the front line, but we're not where it ends. We're only where it starts.
And it's complex. I guess that's another
It's very
C.
complex.
None are safe until all are safe. How many more times will we hear that?
How do you help the world understand what it takes? Because I think people hear it and it's hard to follow and understand.
Yep.
What's the main takeaway that people should think about?
Our message has to be appropriate to audience, and therefore the things that we can say to the international financial institutions and the way they need reform, we have to say. Why we need long-term financial instruments, why we need a balance sheet that's an international balance sheet rather than making us put on small countries or developing countries on our balance sheet the consequences of the misbehavior of large countries. By the same token, if we're talking now to average citizens, we need active citizenship. We need you to have a duty of care to one another and a duty to work with one another. And what do we need? We need you to conserve where you can. We need your voice to be heard to make people and governments do the right thing. And we need to ensure that you understand that there's a direct link between global public goods and your personal well-being, your community welfare, your national well-being. And we need to get that right, because if not, you're going to get a lot of populism parading as progress, and that ends up causing us to regress and not go forward.
Failure to provide the critical finance and that of loss and damage is measured, my friends, in lives.
I'm going to take you to this building. We're at the United Nations a year later, and we're still talking about your speech at the General Assembly. You pull no punches, especially when it comes to the climate crisis. Madam Prime Minister, you've said before that prayers and hopes are not strategies. As we often speak about the challenges, what are some of the solutions and the strategies that are giving you hope right now?
I think that the level of awareness now on some of the issues that simply was not there in 2018 when I first came to office is good. Does that mean we are where we need to be? No, it isn't. But I do see some green shoots and I do see some movement. And sometimes in life, you know, President Obama used to say all the time, history doesn't happen in a straight line. And he's absolutely correct. But we need to stay focused and stay on track. And we need to recognize that sometimes you start with those who constitute the coalition of the willing. And if we can start with them, then others will begin to see that, look, there are clear benefits here for staying the course.
Is that we have the means to give every child on this planet a tablet. And we have the means to give every adult a vaccine. And we have the means to invest in protecting the most vulnerable on our planet from a changing climate. But we choose not to. It is not because we do not have enough. It is because we do not have the will to distribute that which we have.
I'm going to take and ask you just to go behind the scenes with us. When you were in that General Assembly hall last year, and when we saw you pull out your phone, and your words just flowed, this really resonated with so many people. Can we ask you how that speech came about?
Honestly, I had a typical speech that was full of policy, rhetoric, and diplomatic speak, and I'm just tired. And I said to the others, look, we've been coming here, we've been saying the same thing year after year. Granted, that was the third year. But you begin to believe that I'm not interested in the form of this job. In fact, I really don't like the lights either. But I do it because if the only way we're going to get somewhere is to speak truth to power, then let's start speaking truth to power. And in that limited opportunity when we have for people to hear us, then we need to speak to our reality and to begin to see how we can make things happen, but at the same time, also moderate expectations, because this world, regrettably, is into too much narrow casting and too much zealotry and bigotry. And we need to recognize that in the middle somewhere, there has to be balance.
You're under the lights a lot, even if you may not love the lights. Is there anything that you wish someone would ask you?
When are we going to get the people who matter the most to do the things that matter the most to the majority of the people? And I want that question asked because I genuinely don't know the answer, and it will trigger in me an answer that it requires partnership, and each person, Mahatma Gandhi said that the change begins with each of us. In Barbados, we have a saying, one blow is kill old cow. That one step at a time, one action at a time, all these things make a difference. And I think that if we can get an understanding of the power of the individual citizen and the power of active citizenship, then the problems that face the world today can be resolved quite easily, because it's not because the world doesn't have enough, it's because we're not using it in a way that is effective for the majority of us on this planet. What I really, really want is for us to be able to have a sense of responsibility towards our environment, but also to the future generations.
And we've come here today to say, try harder, try harder.
Powerful words. And our last question. Following an SDG Roundtable tradition, if you could capture your thoughts, feelings today in just one word, what would that word be?
Can't be one word, it'll be two. Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic is the perfect way for us to close. Thank you, Prime Minister of Barbados and co-chair of the SDG Advocates, Mia Mottley, for joining us for this SDG Roundtable. We're really wishing you the best, and we will be asking those questions, and we will be taking on those actions that you've just set forward.
Thank you for having me, and I hope that we can bring you all down to Barbados so that you begin to see what we're fighting for and why we're fighting so hard.
We're with you.
Thank you.
And it's now just for me to say thank you to everyone for being with us. And you can learn more about the SDGs by following the links in this video. Thank you very much.